It all started with a cardboard box the size of a loaf of bread, delivered 2 days after the funeral. No return address. Just my name, handwritten in faded ink I recognized instantly. My brother's. They said Henry died of natural causes. Quietly, alone, in his trailer outside Winnemucca. But Henry never did anything quietly. I hadn't spoken to him in nearly a decade. Not since he started mumbling about government vans and the ones who remember forgetting. I thought it was paranoia. Old age. His mind slipping through the cracks of a life too long left in the shadows of Cold War secrets. But inside that box, I found 3 things that changed everything. A brass key with no markings. A cassette tape labeled in red grease pencil, Object 13, never declassified. And a folded roadmap of Nevada, 1971 edition, with a single black X scratched into the desert near a place I hadn't thought about since 1962. Sand Hollow. The name alone pulled something loose in me, like an old drawer unjamming after decades. That was where we were stationed. Where we built the shielding systems for underground detonations. Where they told us, you saw nothing and nothing saw you. I played the tape that night. At first, just static. Then Henry's voice, older, raspier than I remembered. If you're hearing this, it means they didn't get to me before my heart did. Good. Maybe now it can end. You need to go back. Sand Hollow. The holding facility. Under the dry lake bed. Use the key. And whatever you do, don't trust what you remember. They took pieces. They took them all. There was a long pause on the tape. You'll know you're close when the signal starts to fade. Then, click. Silence. I sat there for a long time, staring at the tape deck, like it might say more if I just waited long enough. But it didn't. The next morning, I packed my truck. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. Who would believe me anyway? I'm 78 years old. Retired engineer. Former base contractor. No family left. Just a house full of blueprints and coffee-stained regrets. But Sand Hollow, that was something else. Something unfinished. The map took me south, away from the roads people actually use. Past ghost motels and dry diners, until all that remained was sand, scrub, and the faint hum of towers too far off to name. And then, just before dusk, I found it. A rusted-out chain-link fence, half swallowed by desert, surrounding a slab of concrete with a hatch in the center. No labels. No signage. Just a keypad with a single slot. I slid the key in. The lock clicked. The hatch groaned open with the sound of 70 years exhaling. Inside, a spiral staircase, leading down into a silence so thick it felt like being swallowed. I took a breath, when I wasn't sure I'd get to take again, and stepped into the dark. But about 10 steps down, I heard it, a low-frequency hum, like old machinery stirring awake. And then, a voice. Not Henry's. Not mine. Just 6 words. You're not the first to return. But the door didn't close behind me. That alone should have been enough. Protocols etched into my bones from years inside defense systems screamed that a hatch like that, unsealed, meant danger, exposure, breach. But I kept walking. The staircase led me down nearly 4 stories before it ended at a circular steel door, its surface dusted with decades of silence. Faded lettering was stenciled across the center. Compartment B, Cryo Archive. Clearance Epsilon Black. I had never heard of that level of clearance. And I designed systems for levels they denied even existed. To the left of the door was a console, analog, flickering green behind cracked glass. And resting on the console was something that didn't belong in 1952, a handheld Geiger counter, newer than the rest of the tech, with duct tape wrapped around the grip and a label stuck to its side. The label read, Play Tape 2, then Enter. But Henry had only left me 1 tape. Hadn't he? I turned back toward the stairwell, and that's when I saw it. Wedged between 2 steps, half covered in desert grit, was a second cassette. No case. No label. Just a strip of magnetic tape already unraveling like it didn't want to be played. I slid it into my pocket, pulled out the old Walkman I'd brought on a whim, and pressed play. This time, Henry's voice was different, not frantic, but hollow. Compartment B is where they kept the test group after the second sequence failed. You remember the second sequence, don't you? Of course you don't. That's the point. They called it memory dimming. Not erasure, just selective softening. Remove the thread, but leave the fabric. By the time they got to group 13, they weren't just altering memory. They were inserting new ones. The tape word. Then another voice emerged higher, trembling. If I say my name too many times, I forget which version is real. I froze. It wasn't Henry. It was me. Younger. Scared. I had no memory of ever being recorded, of ever volunteering, of ever being inside any test group. But something in my chest locked tight, like a room in my mind had just rattled its doorknob from the inside. I opened the archive door. The air inside wasn't stale, it was sterile, preserved. A long corridor lined with pod-like glass chambers, each numbered, each connected by thick wiring and looping reels of tape feeding into a central terminal labeled Neurofeedback Integration Array. The smell was electric, dust, and ozone. Chamber 13 was cracked open. Its interior was charred. The bed inside had restraint cuffs. The chamber wall bore a handprint, scorched, almost branded, with skin and ash permanently baked into the glass. I stepped back, heart racing. Then something moved behind me. A shadow. And then a face. Half-lit, pale, impossibly familiar. Not Henry. Not me. A woman. She looked 60, maybe older, but the eyes were sharp, focused, and terrified. "You shouldn't be here," she said. I found my voice. "I'm looking for answers." She shook her head slowly. "They don't keep answers here. Only replacements." I asked her name. She paused, then whispered. "They called me Subject 13, but I remember a different name, yours." And when I asked her what she meant, she only said one word. "Switch." She said it gently, like it might slip if spoken too loud. I stared at her, the tremor in her jaw, the way her hands clenched even when idle, like muscle memory belonged to someone else entirely. "What do you mean, switch?" I asked. She took a long, uneven breath. They ran out of subjects. Volunteers dried up after the second round. People started disappearing. So they pulled from the engineers. Ones who'd passed background. Ones with access. Ones like you. "But I wasn't a subject," I said, but the words felt fragile, like I was holding them up against a flood. She pointed at Chamber 13. "You were. Just not always at the same time." The lights above us buzzed faintly. A generator somewhere deeper in the compound stirred, as though our voices were waking things better left asleep. "I don't remember any of that." Her voice cracked. "That's the point. Neither do I. But I remember you." And then she said my full name first, middle, last. The way only Henry used to say it when he was mad at me. I stumbled back. "That's not possible." But she kept going, rattling off memories I didn't even know were mine. A sandstorm in 53. A power failure during test 204. The names of 3 other engineers who never returned from a routine maintenance call beneath Sector 4. Then she said the name of a dog we'd had as kids. One we buried beneath a sycamore tree in our backyard in Tacoma. Something Henry never wrote down. Something I hadn't thought about in 40 years. "You're not remembering," she said. "You're being remembered." Before I could respond, the hallway lights cut out. A low alarm rumbled through the floor, not loud, but pulsing like a heartbeat. Emergency backup kicked in, red, sweeping strobes that made her face flash between human and spectral. "I triggered something," she whispered. "They kept the failsafe active. We have to go." "Go where?" "Down. Past the archive. Toward the coal chamber." The coal chamber was sealed in 1953. Her eyes darkened. "Only on paper." She reached beneath her coat and pulled out a battered clipboard, the kind used by base techs in the 50s. Slipped behind it was a laminated ID badge. Mine, but from 1952. And the photo? Younger me, standing beside her. "I remember now," she said. "They didn't switch our memories. They split them." Before I could ask how or why, the far wall groaned open, revealing a second stairwell descending into darkness. A cold wind rose up through it, carrying the sterile bite of metal and something older. She looked at me, waiting. I hesitated, then took the first step. Each footfall echoed like walking into a place that had been waiting for me, and only me, to return. Halfway down the stairs, the lights went out again, but this time, something else came alive. It started as a vibration underfoot, faint, rhythmic, like the slow pulse of a machine not built to be quiet. Then came the crackle, not of electricity, but of voices, soft, overlapping, fraying at the edges like cassette tape left in the sun. The stairwell widened into a corridor, lined with thick black cables that pulsed faintly with internal light, like veins under skin. At the end, a door stood ajar, metal warped inward as if something had once tried to escape or enter. She didn't speak as we crossed the threshold, and neither did I. Some places punish words. Inside was a vast chamber, not round or square, but disjointed, as if 5 rooms had been stitched together and then abandoned mid-seam. Wires hung from the ceiling like ivy. Along the far wall was a screen, 12 feet wide, flickering with a storm of static broken only by flashes of faces. They weren't clear, but they looked like memories trying to remember themselves. In the center of the room was a chair, part dentist rig, part execution device, surrounded by an array of spools and CRT monitors. Behind it, painted directly on the concrete in faded yellow. Neural Coil Interface, EXP, Node 13B. Authorized use only, OP/Ultra. 1952, ? I approached the chair. My knees didn't want to bend. My breath came in short bursts, like it knew something my brain refused to accept. On one of the CRT screens, my own face appeared, younger, clean-shaven, eyes darting left to right as if searching for a door that wasn't there. And beneath it, Test 13B, Subject Split, Phase 1. I turned to the woman. You said they split us. She nodded. They took your procedural knowledge, engineering, access codes, mission memories, and left them intact. But they siphoned off everything else, family, home, emotion. They stored it in me. I couldn't breathe. You were the asset, she said. I was the vault. The voices from the wall grew louder. Some were screaming. Some were praying. One, I swear it, was singing an old lullaby my mother used to hum during lightning storms. What happened to them? I asked. She looked at the chair. Some cracked. Some faded. Some merged. Merged with who? With each other, she said. And maybe with us. She walked to the console and tapped a blinking button. A door behind the chair hissed open, revealing a narrow passage lit in soft green, like submarine lighting in a flood. That leads to the observation dome, she said, where the records are kept. The original logbooks. Tapes. Even footage. Footage of what? She paused. The first time you and I met. But I don't remember that. She stared straight into my eyes. You will. I stepped toward the hallway, but as I did, the static on the screen suddenly cleared. And staring back at me was Henry. Not younger. Not older. Just Henry. Sitting in a chair. Smiling softly. And whispering something I couldn't hear. But the woman could. She gasped. And ran into the hallway without another word. I chased after her, but when I reached the dome, she was no longer alone. She stood in the center of the circular chamber, frozen, facing an old man, thin, gray, impossibly real, standing in front of a flickering projector console. His back was to me, but I knew that silhouette. It was Henry. Not on a screen. Not a memory. Henry. Alive. He turned slowly, as though waking from a long nap inside time itself. His face was lined but intact, his eyes sharp beneath the haze of decades lost. Thought you might come, he said softly. Didn't think you'd bring her. I couldn't speak. Neither could she. He looked at me, not like a brother, but like someone who had watched me for a very long time from behind glass. You still don't remember it all, do you? He asked. I shook my head. You're supposed to be dead. Dead is a classification, he said. Like clearance. Or memory. Then he turned to the woman. Do you remember me? She blinked slowly. I think so. Henry stepped forward and placed something in her hand. A small brass token etched with a symbol I hadn't seen since 1953. A triangle wrapped in a coil, labeled only 13X. That was your marker, he said. They used it to trigger the false memory cycle. Every time you started to remember, they showed you this. It wiped the slate. She dropped it like it burned. Henry turned to me. They never stopped the program, he said. Just buried it. Right here. Under the dry lake. Object 13 wasn't the facility. It was the experiment itself. You two were the final protocol. Protocol for what? I asked. Henry's voice dropped to a whisper. For survival of classified trauma. They believed if they could segment emotional memory from operational memory, soldiers wouldn't break. You were proof it worked. Until it didn't. My knees went weak. You were my handler, I said slowly. Weren't you? He nodded. Until I became a subject too. We all did, in the end. He gestured to the projector, then powered it on. The wall lit up with grainy footage. A date flashed, April 4th, 1952. Two people in lab coats led me, younger, frightened, into a room. On the far side, she waited, equally young, equally scared. They placed us in chairs. Strapped us down. Injected something. The screen flickered. Now the younger me stood behind glass, eyes blank, repeating a sequence of numbers. She sat in a separate room, weeping, whispering names from our childhood. I don't remember any of this, I said. That's because none of it belongs to you alone, Henry said. You shared the same emotional stream. Half here, half there. That's why when you lost your way, you always dreamed of her. and why she always woke up crying to your name. Then Henry walked to the console. There's one more level, he said, where the original integration logs are kept. Real names. Real files. It's where the experiment began, and where it has to end. I stepped toward him, but something in the woman's face stopped me. Terror. Recognition. And then she said, "But if we open the door, we might not come back out as ourselves." As Henry slid the key into the final lock, the dome shook with a low hum, as if something below had just remembered us too. The wall behind the console creaked, then split, revealing an elevator shaft so old it still bore the name Department of Defense, Psychometric Division in ghosted lettering. The lights inside flickered awake, powered by something that shouldn't still work. Henry motioned us inside. The descent was slow, mechanical, like being lowered into the forgotten well of the country's conscience. No music. No voice. Just the whine of old gears and the ticking of time measured in regrets. The doors opened to reveal a narrow hallway, sterile and humming. Along the walls were rows of filing cabinets, each tagged with a number, each locked. At the end of the corridor stood a single reinforced door, stenciled in red. Object 13, Integration Chamber. Authorization, dormant since 1954. Henry placed his hand on a glass plate. It scanned his palm, blinked green, and opened. Inside was a chamber shaped like a half-dome, walls lined with looping magnetic tape, each reel spinning so slowly it felt like time itself was breathing. In the center stood a large platform, surrounded by a curved wall of monitors, all blank. On a nearby desk sat 3 manila folders, faded, cracked. One had my name. One had hers. The third was empty. Henry picked up the empty one. "This was mine," he said quietly. "They never filled it in. I was never supposed to be here." He turned to us. "I kept this place running," he said. "After they decommissioned it. After they forgot it existed. I stayed because someone had to remember." "Why?" I asked. "Because forgetting is how it happens again," he said. "Not just the experiments. The reasoning. The belief that you can slice a soul and still expect it to hold weight." He pointed to the platform. "If you step onto that, it'll trigger a final synchronization. What was split will try to rejoin. All of it, memory, fear, feeling, fracture. What happens then?" I asked. Henry looked at me, not like a brother, not like a subject, but like a man who had finally stopped running. "You remember what they made you forget, but it might cost the version of you that's standing here." I looked at her. She looked at me. Her eyes shimmered with something like courage, or maybe just fatigue. And then, wordlessly, we stepped onto the platform together. The monitors flickered. The reels spun faster. A low tone filled the room, not mechanical, but human, like hundreds of voices breathing in unison. Then the screen lit up. Footage. Files. Faces. We saw ourselves, across time, across failures. Tests. Interviews. Tears. Memories extracted and injected like data. And then, the truth. A project under MK Ultra, hidden beneath nuclear testing. A psychometric arm designed to test emotional transfer between individuals, using radiation as a catalyst and trauma as the key. Object 13 wasn't just the room, or the program. It was us. Not subjects. Not victims. Instruments. And in that moment, as the final footage played, I felt it. The sharp, searing rush of recognition. The way her memories folded into mine. The way my guilt became hers. And how Henry's voice in the background whispered, "Now you know what they tried to bury." But then the lights flickered, and the door behind us slammed shut. And when the emergency sirens began to wail, we realized something had been listening the whole time, and it had just woken up. The room trembled beneath our feet as a low, rhythmic thrum surged through the foundation, shaking dust from the seams of a chamber untouched since Eisenhower's first term. The reels froze. The lights dimmed to red. And a cold female voice echoed from unseen speakers. "Reintegration complete. Containment protocol breach. Initiating terminal cycle." Henry's face drained of color. "They left a kill switch," he muttered. "Buried in the neuroarray. A failsafe in case anyone ever tried to piece the truth back together." We turned as the platform beneath us hissed and began to descend. "Where is it taking us?" I asked. "To the original vault," he said. "The first chamber. The one they said they sealed in 52. But they never did. They just rerouted it." Down we went, deeper than I knew Sand Hollow ever went. The walls turned to raw rock, then steel again, welded around stone like a wound wrapped in armor. The air grew colder, not in temperature, but in memory. We arrived in silence. The room was wide, round, dark, save for a single bulb swinging from above. In the center, a glass capsule, cracked and dusted, surrounded by rows of monitors and a terminal that blinked as though expecting someone's return. Inside the capsule, a figure. Still. Wired. Alive? We stepped closer. My knees buckled. It was me. Not older. Not younger. Just frozen in time. And beside it, in another capsule, her. This was the original imprint, Henry said, his voice breaking. This is where they held your identities. The backups. The course. Everything else was just a shadow installed in you, her, me. I couldn't breathe. These copies, he continued, they were created to absorb trauma, to test how much a person could endure if they didn't know it was theirs. But we've lived, I whispered. We've aged. He nodded. But not all of us. Some parts stayed here, kept whole, monitored, updated. He stepped toward the terminal, typed a sequence. The monitors blinked and displayed Project Object 13 logs. There it was. My name. Her name. Henry's name. Underlined beneath one header. Subject loop integrity 72 years. Sustained. This whole place, he said, wasn't just storage. It was a loop. They kept rebooting the experiment in us. Every decade. Every time one of us got too close, they'd trigger a resequencing. We'd lose fragments, gain others. A living test of human adaptability to psychological recursion. I felt the weight of my chest collapse inward. Not sorrow. Not fear. Just too much knowing at once. The monitors began to flash red. Final countdown. Vault destabilization. 90 seconds. Henry turned to us. We can shut it down, he said. But only from here. One of us stays. Ends it from the core. I looked at her. She looked at me. No need for words. But before I could speak, Henry stepped forward. He placed his hand on the console. No more forgetting, he said. Not for you too. I carried this long enough. Let someone remember. Let someone really remember. He smiled, that crooked grin I hadn't seen since we were boys in the garage, building radios out of scrap. The vault shook violently. She pulled me toward the elevator. As the doors closed, I caught one last glimpse of Henry, standing calmly in the middle of that impossible chamber, hand pressed to the glass, the light flickering behind him. And then silence. Above ground, the hatch groaned open behind us. Night air rushed in like breath returned to lungs long collapsed. She turned to me. Do you remember it all now? I nodded. Tears fell without effort. Yes, I said. And it's heavier than I thought. We stood there for a long time, two fractured people made whole again by the very thing that was designed to break them. And in the distance, as dawn began to stretch its arms across the desert, a dust devil kicked up over the old dry lake bed, spinning, circling, like a memory still trying to settle. Object 13 was gone. But the truth wasn't. Because now, someone finally remembered. And that someone was me.